Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. Up first here, hazardous weather graphic. Got a winter weather advisory out that begins at noon Tuesday, tomorrow, and continues through tomorrow night, through Tuesday night, actually continues into Wednesday morning as well. And that's for the greater Prudhoe Bay area there in the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Looking for winds to pick up out of the west and gusts to possibly as high as 40 miles an hour with 2 to 4 inches of snow. They'll create visibilities to less than a half a mile at times. And again, that's a advisory beginning for tonight and tomorrow. Actually, for tomorrow night and into early Wednesday. Then there's a winter storm watch out here for the extreme eastern Beaufort Sea coast, Kaktovik, Barter Island, those locations, and that's for same time period. The watch starts tomorrow about noontime and continues through tomorrow night and actually into midday Wednesday, and that's for 2 to 4 inches of snow that could possibly fall with winds gusting to 50 miles per hour. And that'll result in wind chills to 50 below or colder, and also visibilities could be down to 0, so it could be some whiteout conditions. Moving on to the satellite imagery, we've got this north-south oriented band of moisture kind of pushed eastward here, starting to break out a little bit back to the west, but pretty stationary right through here with the flow south to north, but not a lot of moisture associated with it. Rain throughout the day brought about 1/3 of an inch of precipitation to Kodiak Island, and then some areas of snow up across the Kenai Peninsula as well as Anchorage into the portions of the Susitna-Manuska Valley areas, where Independence Mine picked up about 4 inches. Otherwise, there's 1 to maybe 2 inches around the greater Anchorage-Eagle River area, and some areas of mixed precipitation along the North Gulf Coast. Just about nothing in the Copper River Basin. And moisture back through here, maybe bringing several inches of snow to the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range area, but winds a lot lighter out here in the west than they were yesterday at this time. And we can see clouds now spreading in to the panhandle with light rain. Should start showing up along the north coast here at any minute, actually, here if it hasn't already around Elfin Cove, but about mid-afternoon, still back off the coast there, and some breaks, especially down toward Dixon Entrance. Not too bad. For today, we've got this front kind of draped across the Kuskokwim Valley, west of the Alaska Range there. Some areas of snow with that. In advance of that, more of a mixed precipitation pattern in some areas, especially southern Kenai Peninsula, southern Cook Inlet down to Shelikof Strait, Kamishak Bay. Mostly rain there, Kodiak Island, or it was all rain, Kodiak State Airport, and areas of all the way up along the North Gulf Coast region. Break right through here, back to the southwest, just isolated showers or flurries there along the coast with a little more extensive area of light snow going on up in this area with a trough farther to the north. So some light snow, about a few inches here, northern Seward Peninsula right up in toward the upslope areas of the Brooks Range there. Ending back to the west, high pressure over the Russian Far East, and some light snow and fog around Barrow. Amounts not anything significant. Otherwise, dry for the remainder of the Arctic coast. Big storm out here in the west, producing storm force winds today across the western central Aleutians, with half an inch of rain falling at Adak associated with this, with winds gusting 50 to 55 miles an hour at both Adak and Atka. Back to the west, Shimia getting wind gusts over 60 miles per hour there. Very tight gradient here across the southern and southwest Bering Sea. And the storm warnings will end as the front edges northward later tonight. But otherwise, eastern Bering Sea looking really good. A break in the Pribilofs there. breaking the pattern here for the Alaska Peninsula with some possible clearing showing up. That's maybe clearing. Otherwise, fair skies back to the north. And for tonight, northeast flow here will produce a few isolated snow showers that may collide with the Pribilof Islands. But again, if that happens, if you pick up any of them, they won't amount to too much at all. But we'll see an area of light snow here from the Kuskokwim Delta into the Kuskokwim Valley and northeastward along that Arctic boundary into the eastern interior. And then some snow showers behind that, followed by clearing and colder temperatures up over the northwest. And a trough cutting across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. That'll produce areas of snow. Winds at this point not too bad. This front will weaken, slide eastward. So the storm warnings tonight will lift up into the southern and southwest Bering Sea. Just gales with that low center to the south of the western Aleutians. So winds will be coming down out that way. And behind the front, really dropping off Adak and Atka, probably even under gale force there. Possible gales for the Fox Islands with periods of rain, showery back to the west. And chance of rain here on the northern panhandle. It could be a little bit farther to the east, but this whole system not really moving a whole lot. We've got that low center brought the gale force winds in the Gulf of Alaska today. They'll continue to pump more moisture up into the Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound, so you could see some moderate amounts of rain with that, maybe up to ½ an inch falling in a 12-hour period overnight tonight and into early tomorrow. Again, a mixed pattern farther to the north and west, and then just flat-out snow here north of that. And for tomorrow, Tuesday, so have this Arctic front draped right through here roughly, and quite an area of snow with that. Light snow extending all the way down, possibly into northern Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, maybe the Matanuska Valley, linking up with moisture with this low near Seward, about 1,002 millibars. So it'll still be a mix along the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound area, and rain, pretty good bet for the Panhandle. Look for possible sunshine, Kodiak Island during the day tomorrow, kind of in between systems there. This one's staying down to the south, at least initially, at least through tomorrow, so not too bad across Bristol Bay. Chance of snow from this front over the Pribilofs, and rain and snow the Alaska Peninsula. Winds not all that bad. Actually, winds pretty light there, and winds continue to diminish over the Aleutians, that 974 millibar low and the tightest gradient to the south, and then that tighter gradient also shifting northward a little bit there. With the front itself, high pressure developing over the Chukchi Sea, so that drying it out considerably here, and colder temperatures return to the north and northwest interior, and could get a little breezy through the passes of the central eastern Brooks Range, Anatuvik-Adigan. Arctic Village, look for snow tomorrow with snow for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and again, conditions coming down, so blowing snow will accompany that. Winds on the increase there as well. Looking ahead to Tuesday, kind of a series of troughs swinging down. That's where we got the winter storm watch out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, Kaktovik and Barter Islands. So snow blowing snow, could see whiteout conditions there, cold temperatures, wind chills at least a 50 below zero. And kind of a gradient now in the interior, so a little breezy, higher elevations, nothing serious though, and dry though from the upper Tanana Valley westward out to the Seward Peninsula. Best chance of clearing up to the northwest, but dry conditions all the way down along the southwest coast. And again, that weak offshore flow that could pick up some moisture for snow showers in the Pribilofs. Just a slight chance, though, dry for the central Aleutians. Isolated showers for the Alaska Peninsula. Out to the west, the next storm brings gale force winds and rain back into the far western Aleutians, possibly reaching Adak late in the afternoon, more likely until Wednesday evening out there. And this front produces periods of rain, light rain, or rain and snow mixed here across the southeast coast. And the North Gulf Coast once again, as this area of snow sets up mostly over the Copper River Basin, northward to North Waitok, Delta Junction, those areas, and then ends, at least by the time you get to the White Mountains, if not farther to the south. And isolated rain and snow showers, Kodiak Island, Kamishak Bay. Lows for tonight, 30s, mid to upper for the southeast coast, mid-30s North Gulf Coast, lower 30s south central Alaska, and 20s or teens in the Tanana Valley there, with dropping down around 10 for Fort Yukon and Bettles. Single numbers in the Brooks Range, and 5 to 10 below on the Arctic coast, a little chillier back here to the west. And look for a low of 3 at Nome and down to 0 for Savunga. Otherwise, upper 20s for the Pribilofs. and mid-20s for the Bristol Bay area. Highs tomorrow, mid-30s there for Bristol Bay. Mid to upper 30s here for the South Central Alaska area with near 40 for Kodiak. And staying below zero, especially on the western Arctic coast. There 16 below at Point Lay. Highs upper 30s to lower 40s for the southeast coast. And your lows the following morning, notably cooler up here along the Arctic coast. Now you're 15 to 25 below, could drop down to maybe 30 below on the north slope. And gradually rising to right around zero. You can see roughly the 0 degree isotherm from roughly just north of Eagle across the central interior, cutting across the Seward Peninsula there. So everywhere to the south, of course, above zero. And still rather mild here, south central Alaska, lows in the lower to mid-20s. Looks like a colder shot will be dropping down after Wednesday night, actually on Thursday, especially over the eastern interior here and back to the northwest. Otherwise, for Wednesday, highs in the 30s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
A lot of IFR here from the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, in across much of the central and southern interior here, right down to the Gulf of Alaska. Stays VFR to start the day for the Panhandle. Also up here to the north and northwest, a little bit of marginal stuff, the central Arctic coast, and then band of IFR here from St. Matthew Island across the Pribilofs, the Alaska Peninsula, and then just socked in for the Aleutians and the southwest Bering Sea. Tomorrow afternoon, that doesn't change much, kind of shifts up to the north here a little bit and expands into the peninsula. IFR holds here along the southwest coast. VFR, though, St. Lawrence Island into the Chukchi Sea and into the northwest interior. IFR here along that boundary from the eastern interior and the Tanana Valley right on down Madanuska-Susitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet, across Prince William Sound into the northern Panhandle. And better conditions down to the south, though, still holding on to some VFR flying. And then it gets even, the IFR advances even further southeastward across the Panhandle by Wednesday morning. But notice northern half of the state, all VFR, IFR in a band there right across southern Alaska, Copper River Basin on out to the northern Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay areas. IFR out here over the Aleutians. And then from Wednesday afternoon, quite an area of IFR persisting out here over the eastern Bering, right down to the Fox Islands, western Alaska Peninsula. IFR holds here, Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Delta coast up to about Nunivak Island. Marginal Adak and Atka back into the IFR out there towards Shimia. VFR over much of the interior here except for the eastern north slope and Arctic coast, calling it marginal. And IFR for all of the southeast coast. Passes tomorrow around Tuvik and Adigan, both occasionally marginal. And Lake Clark and Merrill expect IFR at some point in the day tomorrow, probably most of the day for both Lake Clark, Merrill, rainy as well as windy. And Isabel looks IFR. Mentasta a little better, call it marginal. And for Tanita, IFR to start, trying to improve to marginal into the afternoon. And for Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR becoming IFR. And for freezing levels at the surface here along the North Gulf Coast, down along the Alaska Peninsula areas, and 2,000 to 4,000 feet, excuse me, 2,000 to 6,000 feet there across the southeast coast. And out to the west, we've got 2,000 feet up over the Adak-Atka area. Otherwise at the surface, just north of St. Paul. Icing, a couple of areas here, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians of just isolated moderate, and another one from the central Aleutians out to Shimia. And then some isolated moderate icing here, possibly mixed, actually from the southwest coast, eastward into northern Cook Inlet, Madanuska-Susitna Valley, and then right up the east side there, not to a lesser extent here over the Copper River Basin and then that 40-mile country, but heavier though. Looks like areas of considerable moderate for the southeast coast on up to about Yakutat, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay. Jet stream showing a trough kind of wiggling through the upper wind flow there associated with that heavier icing for the Panhandle. Otherwise, southerly flow here kind of splitting now instead of punching right up in. It's sort of diverted around. Easterly 70 knots and then westerly 70 knots here along the Arctic coast. Taking a look at 9,000 feet. High pressure back over the Russian Far East. Northwest winds up to 45 knots here, coming right into the central Arctic coast and then back around 25 to 35 out of the east-northeast here right on out to St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea. And then much lighter, though, you get down toward Kuskokwim Bay, just 10 to 15 into Bristol Bay. Southerlies 20 heading toward Kodiak. And then this low southwest, not all that bad, 20 to 30 knots there ahead of the low center, and not too strong behind it either. Got 40-knot winds there across Dixon Entrance, otherwise 25 to 40 across the Panhandle, again at 9,000 feet, 20 to 30 over the southeast interior. And for 3,000 feet southwest, 20 to 30 knots here across the Panhandle. Copper River Basin and southern Alaska, actually 5 to 15 knot winds, 25 right along the North Gulf Coast. Not bad on the winds for Bristol Bay, northeast or east-northeast, 20 to 30 knots here, coming across into St. Lawrence Island out of the interior, northwest 30 on the Arctic coast, and winds 30 to 40 knots there in close to that low center, otherwise easterlies across the northern Bering. Turbulence-wise, moderate chop here, Brooks Range, Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and part of the southwest coast, as well as the central Aleutians and areas of the Panhandle.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Dehne and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by EPSCoR to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Dehne's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that that would be easier to travel with, you know, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state. Which
you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy, and it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis still showing ice sort of increasing around St. Matthew Island there. It looks like a little less to the east now, and the winds are going to become more northeasterly after being pretty light today out there. They're going to become more northeasterly, so there'd be a chance of, looks like this ice will advance a little farther to the south, and then later in the week, looks like they'll become due easterly once again. So it looks like the upcoming week to expect ice to increase around St. Matthew Island. Coastal water forecast for the Panhandle, south coast, small craft advisory, southeast 25, gales on the north coast, winds up to 40 knots there, 13-foot seas, and southeast 15, southern central inside waters, Lynn Canal, south 15. Outlook for Wednesday, southeast 20 for Lynn Canal, and 15-knot southeasterlies here continue, so really no change for the central and southern inside waters. Light winds now out along the coast, westerly 10 to 15 on the south coast, southwest 15 on the north coast. And for Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands, northeast 20 knots, south side north 20, west 20 Kamishak Bay, only 15 though for the Barren Islands, southwest 20 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, and looks like south 25 right across Middleton Island, or that zone there, eastern North Gulf Coast, seas 13 feet. 30-knot easterlies in store for Prince William Sound with 6-foot seas. For Wednesday, coming down to southeast 10 knots, seas subsiding back to 2 feet. Southeast 10 here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, south 10 on the west side. Barren Islands, light southeasterlies. West 15, Kamishak Bay, and light southeast winds at about 10 knots with slight seas for Cook Inlet. Bristol Bay, southeast 10 there, so not too bad. 20 to 25 knot easterlies for the Alaska Peninsula, seas up to 10 feet. And then light southeast winds at 15 here, southwest of Sitkinak, and west 20 for Kodiak Island. And then for Wednesday, northwest 15 there on the east side, light northeasterlies in Shelikof Strait. That same wind pattern also out here for Bristol Bay on down to Cape Sarachev on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest 20 knots here from Cape Sarachef to Castle Cape to Sitkinak, west 15 seas, excuse me, up to 13 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, for the western Aleutians, east winds, 35 knots tomorrow, southeast 30 here, so a much lighter wind day coming up tomorrow there, as well as for Adak and Atco with small craft advisory southeast winds in the forecast, and the Fox Islands, east winds 25 to 30, seas up to 22 feet. And for Wednesday, southwest or west-southwest, 15 to 20 knots here, or 15 to 30 knots, strongest south of the islands. And also minimum gales here, quite a difference across the islands here. On the Pacific side, southwest 35, 25-foot seas on north of Adak and Atco, southwest 20, and seas just 7 feet. And then gales return in the afternoon over the western Aleutians, that next storm pushing in. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, north at 20, east 25 for the Pribilofs, northeast 30, St. Matthew Island. So definitely those northeast winds are on the increase tomorrow here, so that's going to push that ice right on down. And we got brisk wind advisories from the north side of Nunivak Island right up across Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. Outlook for Wednesday, turning easterly already here, so 20 to 25 out of the east, but still northeast St. Matthew Island at 30 knots, Norton Sound at 25, just 10 knots there south of Nunivak Island, and east 15 for the Pribilofs. Up along the Beaufort Sea coast, brisk wind advisories, all areas there. West winds 25 knots, a little stronger there on the east end, and 20-knot winds from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, north 25, Cape Thompson to Wales. And loose brisk wind advisories there on Wednesday, and really lighter winds here on the central and west side, 15 to 20 out of the north-northwest. But those westerlies continue, 25 to 30 knots, keeping the brisk wind advisories in effect for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast through Wednesday. And for tonight, low pressure here south of the Kenai Peninsula, continuing to pump moisture northwestward. So it could be some moderate amounts of rain here on the south coast of the Kenai up into western Prince William Sound, eastward to Cordova, and a little breezy too, gales eastern North Gulf Coast tonight. And then dry for the Panhandle, an area of snow back to the southwest with drier, chillier temperatures back to the northwest, and snow possible on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Weakening front pushes rain and a little bit of an increase in the wind into the Fox Islands. And then for tomorrow, low slowly weakens out there in the west, and rain for the Alaska Peninsula, rain in the Panhandle, colder and windier up to the north.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.